قولي.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The only thing I understood from that was, without further ado, I present you Ahmad Haneef. Assalamu alaikum.
Listen, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Bari'il Khalaik Ajma'een. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulihi wa Nabihi Abil Qasim Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I'm very pleased to meet you all. This is my first trip to Denmark. You know, I have a very good report to give my wife when I go home. And I'm very pleased to discuss the particular subject at hand, which is the metaphysical basis of marriage in Islam. I think the subject of marriage is a very important subject because it is right along with the issue of women and hijab and so on. That is one of the crucial points of contention, criticism, and opposition to Islam. And this is based upon, as you know, not only a misunderstanding of Islam, but it is also based upon the wrong examples that they tend to zero in upon, they tend to focus upon with respect to Muslim conduct. I remember that a few months ago, you had on the cover of Time magazine a woman with her nose cut off. And this was a crime committed in Afghanistan at the time because this girl wanted to, I think, come out of a marriage or something to that effect. And then you hear about things like honor killings and murders, killing daughters because they become too Western and things of that nature, which, although they might be not the practice of people in the mainstream of Islam, nevertheless, they do exist and they are focused upon by Western media in order to further their argument against Muslims and against Islam. One of the things that I believe Muslims need to know is that much of our practices and our beliefs are based upon very profound and deep metaphysical and philosophical principles. And I would like to touch upon this today, give some glimpses into this with respect to the issue of marriage. Because marriage is not just simply a ritual or a contract with which men and women undergo. Marriage has a profound implication, that has profound roots in the very belief system of Islam itself. To be able to approach this subject, we have first to be aware of the idea or the concept of signs in Islam and the universal principles of Islam as manifested or mentioned in the Holy Quran. Allah says in the Holy Quran, for example, وَمِن كُلِّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقْنَا زَوْجَيْنِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ. In all things we have created pairs so that you may pay heed, you may take admonishment. All things we have created in pairs. So we see that in marriage it is the pairing of people. Indeed, the word zawj means pair, means a part of a pair. Allah says all things we have created in pairs. So there is no exception in this world to a pair. There is no one individual thing that does not have its opposite, or as we would say, its complement. Human beings, as part of creation, therefore, are created in pairs. And this goes beyond just us being biological organisms. This goes beyond us just simply being, two different biological, or two people of the same species that have just different biological compositions. Indeed, when you have pairs, it is only in this context that we could make sense of things. It is only in this context that we could understand things. How could we understand, for example, the concept of up if we don't have the concept of down? How could we understand what attraction is if we do not know what repulsion is? How could we understand heaven if we don't understand hell? Or how could we understand obedience instead of disobedience? Indeed, this is the characteristic of this world. The characteristic of this world is the relationship between pairs, out of which comes our understanding, and out of which comes generation, out of which comes creation. Can you imagine a sky without the earth? When the sky we're talking about is not space, but that blue veil that covers the earth, which is what we call the atmosphere. Can we imagine up without down, left without right, and so on? We cannot. And this is the way we think. We think in what we call discursive reasoning. Okay? And the entire subject of logic or mantic is based upon this. It's based upon putting opposites together. If it is not this, then it is that. If it is neither this or that, then it is something else. It always involves the relationship between two particular things. And when we have this relationship of opposites, we emerge into the realm of equilibrium. In the sense that when one opposite is too great, the other one compensates. When one is too weak, the other one compensates for that weakness in that thing. And so therefore, these are things that influence our understanding of relationships in religion and relationships in marriage. Because if, for example, a man in a relationship does not pull his weight, does not take his responsibility, then the woman takes that responsibility. And that man loses his manness, and that woman becomes more man than him. And if a woman, for example, loses her femininity, then the man becomes a little more masculine and a little more dominating, and this type of thing takes place. What we find in contemporary society today is the destruction of the differences between men and women. Because if we live in a world that is based upon opposites, if we could only understand one thing by comparing it to another, then fundamentally as human beings, we should be able to understand ourselves as men by comparing ourselves to women, or understand ourselves as women by comparing ourselves to men. When men don't know what a man is, and women don't know what a woman is, what does that lead to? That leads to confusion. That leads to being lost. That leads to what we call corruption. And corruption in Islam is defined as not having a thing in its proper place. Almost the opposite of what justice is. Justice in Islam is defined as having a thing in its proper place. Corruption is defined as that thing losing its value in the scheme of things. And we live in a society today that actually tries to tell us that really there is no difference between men and women. The only difference is one of accident. That men and women are absolutely equal. And so therefore, it becomes okay for a man to marry a man and a woman to marry a woman. Because at the end of the day, there is no difference between them. This goes against fundamentally the reality of things. Allah says He created things in pairs so that we can take heed. Take heed. We could take admonishment. We could learn something from this. It is in the relationship of this pair that we get to know ourselves. And modern society, for example, even though it says that we are for equality, what are their standards of judging males and females? What are their standards of judging men? What does a feminist want? What does a feminist want? Well, feminists want the same thing men want. They do not want the things women want. Feminists want power. They want economic domination. They want to dress however they want to dress. If they want to dress like a man, they can dress like a man. You don't hear feminists talking about wanting motherhood. You don't hear feminists talking about wanting women's rights as women to be respected. Indeed, Western society is a very masculinized society. It is a society that destroys the character of women. On the other hand, it tries to feminize men. Have you ever, anybody hear of the term metrosexual? You've heard of that term, metrosexual? Okay? You know what's metrosexual? Okay? Metrosexual is it's a strange word, you know, because it defines a guy who is a heterosexual, but then they make it kind of strange, you know. It's kind of like a different. You have homosexual, heterosexual, and now you have metrosexual. You see, maybe you have this O, you know, the metro, homo, hetero. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't know, some word with O in it. You add sexual to it, you get another category. What's a metrosexual? A metrosexual is a guy who looks after himself. Okay? It's been described to me. He looks after himself. He goes to the gym and he works out. He eats healthy. Okay? And he dresses with taste. Well, that describes me. You know, so what does it do? You see, it creates a kind of a discord in your mind, because we live in an environment right now where these sexual categories are continuously expanding. Okay? Before we were talking about gay rights, now it's LGBT rights. You heard about that? LGBT. Anybody ever heard about that? You should put this here because this is very, very shaky. Yeah. You ever heard of LGBT rights? No. Lesbian, bisexual, gay, and transsexual. Okay, it's no longer gay rights. It's 4 of them now. In the next 5 years, it might be 6. It just keeps expanding. So now in this environment, okay, you get this concept metrosexual. And guess who is describing? You. Okay? So we become lost. We become lost. Why? Because we have diverted away from the pair, from understanding ourselves as the pair. It is the existence of the masculine pole and the feminine pole that helps us to define ourselves. And this masculine pole and feminine pole are not something that came up in creation. This is something that is in the very essence of existence itself. I'm sure many of you might have heard of the very beautiful Hadith Qudsi, where Allah says, I was I just mentioned it today to some brothers. I was a useful treasure. I was a beautiful treasure. I was a beautiful treasure. And I desired to be known. So I created mankind that I be known. Now the Arabic word for mankind is khalq, which can also be interpreted to be creation. And the beauty of this hadith is it means both. He created creation and he created mankind for him to be known. Allah did not need us, but Allah's very mercy itself is the source of him desiring to create in order to benefit. I was a hidden treasure. This is the word, a hidden treasure. And I desire to be known. A hidden treasure. And it's before it was manifested, it was hidden. It was with the that. And he presented it and created people who could love him, who could know him. Now, most of the great sages, the great awliya, the great philosophers say that the creation is basically the self-disclosure of Allah. And indeed, Allah in the Holy Quran talks to us about looking at the signs, ayat, in the creation that talk about him. What is a sign? A sign is a symbol that points to something else. And where do these signs point to? They point to Allah. So the creation is a self-disclosure of Allah. Now we're trying to get to the root of masculine and feminine. That's what we're trying to get. Don't forget this. The names of Allah can be broken down into two categories. Either the names of beauty and the names of majesty, or the names of the zahir and the names of the batin, the names that are apparent or outward and the names that are inward. When the scholars and the sages categorize these names, the names of beauty are basically the names of Rahmah. Allah as the forgiver, Allah as the Latif, the subtle, Allah as Al-Wadud, the beloved, things of that nature. Allah as Al-Razik, the provider. All of these names come under the names of beauty. Ar-Rahman. And the names of majesty are the names of Allah's rigor, of Allah's wrath, of Allah's power. Al-Muntaqim, the avenger, the one who punishes you when you do wrong. These are the two sets of the names of might and majesty and the names of mercy. These can be considered to be the masculine names, the names of majesty, and the feminine names of Allah. And when we say masculine and feminine, we do not mean gender, we mean quality. We mean quality. Be careful. For example, when you look at some of the best athletes, you find that they have a feminine quality. You look at Muhammad Ali, okay? Before he went into a fight, he'd always look at the people and says, I'm the most beautiful boxer you have ever seen. Okay? This is beauty. When he got into the ring, he boxed viciously, but he boxed with finesse and with style. That's a feminine quality. When you look at Cristiano Ronaldo, okay? Good-looking guy. All right? When you look at Thierry Henry, he does ballet with the ball. Right? This is a feminine quality. Many of the great athletes have this finesse, this beauty about them. So when we're talking about femininity, we're not talking about male and female here. Okay? We're talking about a quality. These feminine names of Allah, the names of beauty, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, it comes from the word Rahm, the womb. These are the names we call upon when we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Him in the names of these names to look upon us. We ask Him to forgive us. We ask Him to indulge us. We ask Him to be patient with us, and so forth and so on. The names of majesty, on the other hand, are the names of power. And so men and women tend to be representatives of the poles of this divine disclosure, this divine self-manifestation in the universe. Because everything has a name of Allah or some names of Allah, or manifest some names of Allah. A mountain represents Allah's majesty and the name Al-Qawi. And the flower represents the name Al-Jamal. And we could go on and see these names in the existence of things. They are signs pointing to Allah. But no creature is more complete in creation than the human being. And the human being possesses in himself or herself, in a limited sense as creation, all of the names: beauty, majesty, justice, wisdom, love, and so on. And that is why a human being can love Allah. Because there is some kind of similarity going on between a human being and Allah. Some kind of correspondence taking place. You cannot love that which you do not know. You can't love what you don't know. You can't love that which you do not have some kind of correspondence with. So Allah has put us, created us with these types of potentials to realize these names in ourselves. And this is why, for example, it is only after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught Adam the names that He told the angels to bow down to Him. So men tend to represent the names of Jalal, the names of majesty. And women tend to represent the names of mercy. What is marriage? Marriage is an act of completion. When we get married, those people, the individual who represents that one pole of the names and the one that represents the other pole of the names, when they get together, we find completion. Remember that at one point, the human being was what they call an androgyne. An androgyne is a male and a female in one. This Adam before Eve was created. And then Allah created from the clay of Adam. The idea of Eve being created by the rib, from the rib, is Sunni hadith. Okay? Our hadith is that Eve was created from the clay of Adam. So she is of the same substance of Adam. And at that point, you had two individuals. One representing the masculine pole, and the other one representing the feminine pole. And there's a very interesting story that after Adam woke up and he saw Eve on the other side of the garden, and Eve is sitting there going like this, you know, Adam asks Allah, he says, who is that? And Allah says, that's your wife. And Adam looks at Eve and says, come over here. And Eve says, no, you come over here. What it indicates is we move towards the women. They just stay and blink their eyes and make us come to them. But it is the part seeking wholeness from the other. That when we come together in marriage, the both parties arrive at a completion and a totality that they could experience in the other. It is when men marry women that men learn things like patience and softness and romance. Men are not romantic creatures, you know. Right? Men are very directly focused. You see? But women, no. They're like, hold on. Let's talk. Let's get to know each other. They make us more civilized. Right? And you know, because men like to control, okay, women resist. And to be able to resist this control, okay, or to adapt to it, she also has to bring out a certain masculine aspect of herself. You know the sign, the yin and the yang? You know, the two circles, like, you know, like this, you know, right? You know, the black one has a white dot and the white one has a black dot. What does it indicate? It's a very, very profound symbol. In the male, there is the opposite in him, in a potential. And in the female, there's the opposite in her, in potential. And marriage is something that brings these things out. Now, to be able to get close to Allah, okay, we have to be as perfect as we can. The more perfect you are, the more pious you are, the less attached you are to the world, for example. All of these things are divine qualities. They reflect the divine qualities. Ramadan, for example. In Ramadan, we say that we are the guests at Allah's banquet. We're not eating any food, not drinking any drink, but they say we are guests at Allah's banquet. What does it mean, guests at Allah's banquet? Well, we are being fed on spiritual food. And we are being Allah's guests because in a certain sense we are being like Him. He doesn't need food, He doesn't need drink, He doesn't need the opposite sex. And so we are behaving as if we are like this. And this brings us closer to Him. Allah is perfect and He loves perfection. He's beautiful and He loves beauty. So when we realize our full potential as a human being in marriage, this is why it is said the prayer of a married man is worth, 7 times or 70 times the prayer of a non-married person. The sleep of a married person is better than the staying up at night and praying of the unmarried person and things of that nature. Why? Because we have achieved a state when you're married. You achieve a state of perfection. And the state is the most important prerequisite for the action. If you're not in the right state, you would not be able to perform the perfect or correct action. And because of this, marriage is something that is completing for us. The fact that we live in a society where marriage has degenerated, where people no longer get married, or they get married for the wrong reasons. You know, they want to get married underwater, and they want to get married on top of a mountain, and they want to get married skydiving, and that kind of thing. All of these things are really nothing but symbols that show the degeneration of mankind. It is a sign that people no longer know themselves. And if you don't know yourself, you can't know your Lord. Man arafa nafsahu, arafa rabbahu. Why does knowing yourself, what relationship does it have with knowing your Lord? What relationship does that have with knowing your Lord? Because we are the representatives of the divine names. We are the representatives of the divine names. A good example in knowing yourself, because to know yourself means that you have to remove those extra things that say that is you. You have to remove those extra things that say that is you. You have to get past your personality. You have to get past your habits. And when you get past these things, you get into knowing the real you. It is like the number line. You know the number line, the X and the Y axis, right? When you ask somebody, where is the 0 on the X and Y axis? They show you where the X and the Y axis intersect each other. See, that's where the 0 is. It's not true. There's only one place the 0 is. And why is the 0 there? Okay, if you have a Y axis alone, is there a 0 on it? Yes, it is. Right in the middle. Okay? Where the minus powers and the positive powers neutralize each other, that's where the 0 is. Similarly with the x-axis. But move one step ahead. There is 1. Is the 0 there? Yes, it is. But it's hidden by 1. Okay? It's hidden by you saying, I'm Danish. That's 1. I'm white. That's 1. I'm black. That's 1. I'm neither white or black. Doesn't matter. Danish, Canadian, it doesn't matter. What remains is 0. Right there. To know yourself means to go beyond yourself. To go beyond your personality or your character. And you discover the divine self-manifestation in you. Allah says in a hadith Qudsi, the heavens and the earth cannot contain me, but the heart of my believing slave, that could contain me. When we marry with a practicing Muslim or Muslimah that is striving to meet their Lord, we discover ourselves. We discover totality. We discover completion. We discover love. Love in Allah. Love for Allah. We discover cooperation in striving towards going to Allah. One morning, you're too lazy to get up and pray. Your wife gives you a good, and you get up and you pray. The next morning, it's her turn. It's a partnership. This is what marriage in Islam is all about. The people in whose hearts there is a disease, they hate that. They hate hijab. They hate being masculine, and they hate being feminine. And they hate marriage. They try to make fun of it. That's why they do it under the water, and they do it on top of the mountain, and they do it when they are skydiving. They make fun of it. It is no longer something profound. So we must strive to preserve this relationship of marriage. We must strive to preserve our differences, which are important in us knowing ourselves and which are gifts by Allah. A woman is as much a reflection of her Lord as a man is. I was talking to my dear hosts today, and we were talking about hijab. And many people in this society think that hijab is something men impose upon women. Well, what would they say when we say that hijab is something that Allah has created between himself and creation? Allah has said there are 70,000 veils of light and darkness between himself and creation. The first veiled being, if one can call it that, was Allah himself. And because we are a reflection of Allah on this earth, women wearing hijab are women who reflect their Lord, a characteristic of their Lord. And Allah only removes those veils for those who are worthy. And he shows his wrath to those who deserve it. The veils he removes are for those who want to be intimate with him. Those who want to stay up at night and try to get close to him. And then he starts to talk in your hearts. People want to know, where is God? How can I prove him? How can I see him? How can I touch him? They are way off the mark. Because for you to be able to see God would mean that your eyes would be greater than God. Because your eyes could bring something into it. The light of that thing, the image of that thing into it. And that means that thing is not God. To be able to know God, you have to put yourself in synchronicity with him, in harmony with him. You have to tune your soul to pick up the wavelength. And that's when you touch God. That's when you could feel God. That's when you can talk to God and you can hear God talk to you. It's just like a radio wavelength here. It's just like, a Wi-Fi. Right now we are surrounded by Wi-Fi. But we don't see it. Just because you don't see it, you can't say it doesn't exist. Somebody says, get a cell phone. Okay? Punch in the PIN code. And there it is. The same thing we have to do with our bodies and our souls. And we will realize that we know our Lord. I want to stop here because I'm going on, and that's because some of us Ruhanis are like this. So inshallah, I'll stop there, and if there are any questions, comments, I'm sure there's a lot. Inshallah, we take it. Salawat.
على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Don't be shy. You can be up here. It's much worse.
ليسلين صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Shaykhana, there is a question on SMS which is, even though there are all these beautiful things about marriage, how come people still end up being single at the age of 30, 40 and so on?
I think there's a lot of different reasons for this. I don't think there's any one reason. for example, one reason could be, for some women, it could be that some women are overqualified. You know, one of the biggest problems of being single are professional women. Okay, nothing wrong with being a professional woman, but there are very few professional men to go around, and this is a problem that is increasing all the time. A second reason could be, for example, people being too picky, right? You know, people just don't want to, just wanting to get married to the perfect person, you know, and the perfect person never comes around because it's perfect. You can't find a perfect person. You know, the thing is, like attracts like, or complements attract, not opposites attract, complements attract. You know the difference between a complement and an opposite? You know, because I'm talking English, I don't know. A complement is an entity or thing, could be a person, okay, that has qualities that another thing needs that doesn't have. Okay? That's a complement. Okay? Somebody who could strengthen you in areas where you're weak. That's a complement. Okay? You know, you have a jigsaw puzzle. One is like this, one is like this. They complement each other. Instead of like this. They don't complement each other. See? Men and women are complements. Now, you want a perfect person, you have to be a perfect person. When you're a perfect person yourself, you attract a perfect person to yourself. You see? So that's another thing. Some people are very, very picky. Okay? Another thing is, for example, a very interesting thing is, for example, Muslim societies in the West that are largely immigrant societies. Okay? And you find people who grow up here with a certain way of looking at the world. Okay? But somebody wants to get them married to somebody back home in Pakistan. Okay? Who has a different view of the world. Okay? So you have problems here. People might want to stay away from that because their parents insist, if you want to get married, don't marry anybody in Copenhagen, go marry somebody in Pakistan. So they tend to stay away from making that choice. You know, there are many, many reasons why people are reluctant to or are unable to find spouses. One very interesting development is that, like for example, in America, I think in Europe the same thing is also occurring, is that for every one man who embraces Islam, 4 women embrace Islam. Okay? For every one man who becomes a Muslim, 4 women become Muslim. You know, so you have a problem there as well. You know, I think what we need is to develop as communities. What we need is to develop as communities. One way of, you know, controlling that problem is to try to create youth groups from a small age up. Youth groups of boys and girls. You see? When they are part of a striving Islamic community, they have camps, they have Quranic study groups, they have discussion groups and so on. Okay? As they grow, they would tend to get intermarried with each other, for example. You know? We also have to strive to create an organic Muslim community. And what's an organic Muslim community? An organic Muslim community is, okay, you are my friend, you are my brother in Islam, I like you, I want you to marry my sister so that we could be close, we could be family. You see, that type of thing also is something we see among the companions of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where they did these types of things in order to create strong family bonds. Okay? Being a Muslim community does not just simply mean us getting together and coming to the center once or twice every week, or coming and sit down and hear a good talk and then going back to your normal life. Okay? Being a Muslim community is trying to absorb people into interrelationships. There's another reason why marriage is a very important thing for the strengthening of our community. So there are many reasons. And I think if you sit down and you analyze them, you can come up with quite a bit. You know, you ask the 30-year-old or so, why are you not married? What is the thing that's preventing you from being married? You know, and right there you get an answer, and when you have the answer, you will start working on a plan.
Thank you, Sheikh. Telefonnummeret, som man kan sende spørgsmål til, er 42 42 9 313. 42 42 9 313. Next question. Det er en fejl. Der er nogen af dem, der er forkert på dem. Så det er 42 42 9 313. 42 42 9 313. The next question, Sheikhana, is how important is it for a woman to obey her husband? And doesn't it go around as well?
From the hadith of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there is a hierarchy between men and women. There's a hierarchy, okay, a formal hierarchy, not an essential hierarchy, but a formal hierarchy. What I mean by formal as opposed to essential is like this. You are in a classroom, right? And your teacher is teaching. And you think that I am more intelligent than that teacher. It does not give you the right to stand up and tell the teacher, sit down, I'll take over the class. Or you have your parent, and now you are 35 years old, you're a professional, you are very knowledgeable, and you realize, you know what, my dad is pretty dumb, right? He made a lot of mistakes in life, and he's still making mistakes in life. You get to that stage, but that does not give you the right to say, Dad, you're pretty dumb, and from now on, I'll be the head of the household. You can't do this. This breaks down the social structure. And so we have a hierarchy in the family. And the formal head of the family is the man. Of course, we should and must do things in cooperation. A man should take a counsel from his wife in terms of dealing with the issues of the family. But the final decision remains with the man. And so we have this hierarchy. Whenever the hierarchy in the family breaks down, everything breaks down. Remember, the man represents the masculine pole of the divine names. The names of majesty, the name of power, the name of control. The woman represents a different set of divine names. The name of love, the names of intimacy, the names of kindness, the names of softness. An expert woman could control her family with softness. She could. All she has to tell that poor man is, remember last Friday you brought me a rose? I felt so happy. Watch him next Friday. He's going all over the town looking for a rose because, right? Women have power. And indeed, some of the shuyukh have said that the power that Allah gives a man is to compensate for the power women have over him. If you notice, you know something about these feminists? They talk about men objectifying women and so forth and so on, but none of them speak out against women dressing in a sexist way. Have you noticed that? None of them talk against that. Because they know that has power over men, and that's what they want, power. So there's a hierarchy. The man represents that outward aspect of Allah, the one that is to be obeyed. The woman represents that inward aspect of Allah, the one that has to be loved. And so we men, because of that power, we put that power to the disposal of women. We take care of them. We support them out of our income, regardless of whether she has a job or not, or regardless of whether she's the richest person on earth or not. And we take responsibility for them, because we are fulfilling a divine role. And what she does is she provides for that man a love in his heart. And she rules his heart. He might rule the pocketbook. He might rule the rules of the house. But she rules his sense of stability. Nothing could destroy a man more than a woman who destroys his sense of stability. So it's not the other way around. It's a different ball game entirely. Male, quote-unquote, domination is like karate. You know, it's force. You push, you punch, and you hit. Female domination is like judo. You give way, and the stronger object falls under its own weight. It's a different ball game entirely. We should not expect women and men to behave in the same way. We must expect them to behave in the way that they were created.
Next question is, being single in this community, we have racial problems where the parents don't want their kids to be married to a person from another country or culture. How do we solve these kinds of issues and problems?
That's a very good question. How do we solve this? I think, by and large, this problem is a generational problem. I can't speak for this country, right? But for like Canada, America, the UK, apart from refugees, the main reasons why Muslims emigrated to these societies was to make a better life for themselves. Okay, it was not to spread Islam. Okay, it was not to establish Islam. They wanted to preserve their own personal Islam, but it was not to spread Islam. It was to make a better life for themselves. And you can see it in the types of masajid and Islamic centers that they developed. These centers were largely community centers. If you walked in to one of these centers, the language that was used in these centers would be the language of the mother country. Urdu, Persian, Arabic, Turkish, or what have you. It was not a language, the language of the environment, which indicates that that mosque or that center is integrated into the environment. They came to make money, to get a good education, and they also build a masjid or an Islamic center to feel at home. It was also a community center. Now, to be wealthy and to have an education came with a danger. And that danger was to identify with all those values and all those attitudes that made making money and being successful possible. And that is in accordance with the values of that society. So, you go into a society and you see, for example, that, most of the blacks are poor or are dope dealers. That's what you think. or the Mexicans are people who are only the people who serve in people's houses. And you develop an attitude that is condescending or looking down upon them as this particular group. There's a very interesting joke about Persians in Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, for example, there's a lot of Mexicans. And Persians and Mexicans look alike. So whenever a Persian is on a bus and a Mexican comes and sits next to him, he's looking around us to change seats because he doesn't want people to identify him with this guy. You tend to fall into these types of criteria because you don't want to associate with people who do not reflect the aspirations that you have. And this goes contrary to Islam. Because in Islam, we must strive to come to the mustada'afin, the oppressed, the downtrodden, because they're the ones who are willing to embrace Islam. In all of history, it is the upper classes, the rich, and the powerful who reject Islam. But when we come to these countries, we change our focus. We avoid the downtrodden and we move towards the upper class. So you have this element among Muslims where they are unable to project their religion. And part of this is adopting racist attitudes. Also, you find that between Muslims themselves from one particular country, you find prejudices taking place. So you find people from like northern India looking down at people from Kerala, for example, and you find people from one part of the city, let's say in Tehran, looking down on people on the other part of the city, like for example, Ahle Fars and Turks, for example, and these types of attitudes that Muslims have, and these attitudes are not in Islam. And then you want to stand up and say you want to oppose Israel because Israel is being racist to Palestinians when you racist to your own people? Come on, man. Come on. Let's try to be an example to ourselves. What we're finding, however, a light at the end of the tunnel, is that the new generation who is born in this environment do not have these types of attitudes. The new generation don't have these attitudes at all. And therefore, they tend to be much more cosmopolitan. In fact, many of our Muslim societies outside of the West tend to be very, what we call, monocultural. It's one culture. Okay? One kind of people. So it's very interesting. I'm sure many of you who might be black or Indian or whatever, you go to another country, let's say, for example, you go to, let's say, Iran or Arab country, and they ask you, where are you from? And you say, I'm from Denmark. And then they say, no, but really, where are you from? Right? I mean, where your father from? Okay? For many of us who are from America, we have a problem with that. Some of us get very upset. But it's understandable, because in those areas, things like race and nationality tend to be one and the same. But in Western countries, it's not. You could be of Indian extraction and be German, or you could be of Chinese extraction and be English. Okay? I know this especially in America. In Europe, it's not as, it's getting there. It's not as complete. But in America, there's nothing that says, American has to be white. Or American has to be black even, At any rate, the younger generation that is growing up, okay, they have a different attitude. And I think as time goes on and the generations grow up here and grow up in a more cosmopolitan environment, you wouldn't find that type of racism and so on taking place. But unfortunately, yes, I think as an African American, I have never met more racism among Muslims than I have even met among the kuffar. the, people like BNP and these far-right groups notwithstanding. I'm not talking about them, okay? Because these are organized groups that have an agenda. I'm talking about personal relationships with ordinary people. I find it very, very alarming, unfortunately.
Listen, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Another beautiful question is, when is the perfect time to get married in the Western countries?
In a Western country, when is the perfect time to get married? I don't know about... In the Western country, the perfect time to get married is when you have a job. When you finish your schooling and you have a job. That's the perfect time in a Western country, right? The perfect time in Islam is when you, as soon as possible, as soon as you have arrived at the age of taklif, okay, the sooner you get married, the better. And in many hadith, having money or being having property or whatever, and having an apartment or whatever is unimportant. There's a hadith that goes where, for example, one man comes to the Holy Prophet and said, I don't have any money, I'm poor. I would like you to make a dua for me or tell me what I can do to come out of my poverty. And the Prophet said, go and get married. Because when you get married, your wife brings the risk, the sustenance with her. And there's another case where in point, and the sisters might not like this one, so don't listen. Another case in point where a man comes to the Prophet and says the same thing. I'm poor, I don't have anything. And he says, go and get married. And he gets married, and after a little while he comes back and he said, I'm still poor. He said, go get married again. And it's the same thing with kids, right? People want to, but in a Western society, you say, okay, when are we going to have kids, John? He says, well, okay, let's see now. When we buy a house and we have a car and we have a good bank account, then we have kids, okay? Right? But why? Because they think we don't have things to support a child, so we shouldn't have kids. But kids come with their own risk. They come with their own sustenance. You see? I was like that. I was married. I was a good Muslim too. I was married, and we were married for 5 years, and we didn't have any kids. We didn't want any because we wanted the house and finish the school and blah 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 blah. And then my brother got married after me, about 3 years after me. And then one day his wife called my wife and said, "Guess what? I'm pregnant." And we looked at each other and said, "What the heck are we doing? We must be crazy." And the kids came, and there was no hardship whatsoever. Now I got 2 kids in the university in Canada. And every time they call me and say they want money, I'm like, okay, Lord, it's their risk, so you send it to me, I give it to them. And it comes. It comes. Okay? Because this profession, okay, has no money in it. Okay? This cleric, sheikh profession has no money in it. Okay? But you survive. And you survive because Allah sends you risk. I thank my wife for that and my kids. So from an Islamic point of view, as soon as possible. Why? Why? Because Islam is the religion of harmony and of coordination. Okay? You're ready to get married, okay, when you pass the age of puberty. You're ready to get married when you find the opposite sex attractive. You're ready to get married, when you're thinking about marriage and you're thinking about having a woman or you're thinking about having a husband or whatever. You're ready to get married. And if you don't get married, that passion is going to find another way of expressing itself. And invariably, it is the wrong way of expressing itself. And unfortunately, you find the same kind of thing happening in universities or whatever in the Eastern world. People are at the height of their sexual, orientations, their sexual instincts. They're at the height of it. You know, for a young man, it's like between like 15 and it peaks by like 25. By the time he gets to 35, he's on the way downhill. Okay? From a girl, it starts maybe around, 17, 18. The sisters know better than me. And it keeps going until past 35. Alright? And at that time, in the height of our life, we're not married because we're trying to study and we're trying to make money or we're trying to work and so on. What happens? What is going on? Okay? In the kuffar world, we see what they're doing. Okay? We tend to move toward that same direction too because that sexual instinct is too powerful for us. It expresses itself, and if it is not expressed, it will consume us. So it is best to get married as soon as possible and not to be afraid of that. Allah would provide.
Listen, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
A very interesting thing is, I have seen women who got married at young ages, like maybe they're 15. By the time they're 35, they've had their kids. Okay, they're ready to live a life. They're relaxed. We operate in the West. We do the opposite. Okay, you wait till about 35, and after that, you don't have much of a life. So we have to play by another different ball game. You have to play by different rules.
Question is regarding marriage and love. We've been advised not to fall in love before marriage, but if it happens, what are we supposed to do? Is it possible for us to be married with those whom we have fallen in love with?
Yes, of course. Of course. It's the most natural thing. I don't know why people are opposed to it. I think maybe they imply that falling in love means getting involved in a relationship when you're not married. Okay? Yes, that is wrong. Okay? But it's quite possible, for example, it happens so often, you know, where, let's say, you know somebody, you know, and you have no intention of falling in love with them or whatever. You know what I mean? Maybe, for example, in a university and it's you know, as a part of a study group or something, you know, and there's a group you go to coffee or whatever, you know, and something happens, man. This thing happens. This love thing sometimes is a force that comes into your heart, boom, and there's nothing you can do about it. Why not? So beautiful. Yes, get married to the people you love. Nothing wrong with it. Absolutely not. Yes, brother. This brother has a question.
We hear about the importance of hijab, of course, but can you tell us about the importance about the veil of the eyes?
Yeah, I was just thinking about love. I wasn't even hearing what you were saying. I was thinking about how I met my wife. I'd like to share something about how I met my wife. When I just became a Muslim, and I wanted a wife. You know, I wanted a wife. And one day, I was so desperate for a wife. You know, because I used to be a DJ and stuff like that, you know. So I knew about women and so forth, you know. I was so desperate for a wife one day. And that's when you make the best prayers, huh? When you're desperate. When you're really desperate. You make the best prayers of your life. That's the prayers that God listens to. You know. He doesn't listen to these little du'as at the end of your prayer. Oh Lord, give me a good job. Thank you very much. You know, he doesn't listen to that. You know, my God, I tried everything. I couldn't find a job. It's only you could give me a job. God. You know, that's when God listens to you. When it comes from the gut. You know. So one day I said, God, give me a wife, please, you know, the bottom of my heart. The next morning I go to school, and there was my wife to be. It was love at first sight. Love at first sight. You know, I think she even had a halo. You know, the thing, the golden thing. You know, and she was a Christian, you know. So I started to talk to her. She didn't know how I felt. You know, I think she liked me too, very much. But we didn't say anything. And I started to talk to her about deen and about religion and so on. And then one day she said, you know, I'm ready for Islam. And I said, what? You ready? She says, yes. And I gave her Shahadatain and she became a Muslim. And I said, you know what? I want to marry you. She said, okay, let's get married. And that's it. And that's like what? I don't know, 30 years ago. And we have a great relationship. You know. So yes, right? It's great. But love can also grow. Right? Love can also grow. Okay? You don't have to fall in love to get married. But you need to see lovable characters and lovable traits in a person to get married to them. And when you have that, this is a ground for love to grow. You see? And love would happen between you. See? In this society, they say that you should only marry somebody you love. Okay? It's not true. Right? Love can grow. And especially if you put two people in the right circumstance, like marriage, and they have things like taqwa and intelligence and wit and, you know, those things that you like in a person, it will grow from that. So that's another way of having a relationship. Okay, now we exhausted love. What about the question again?
The veil of the eyes.
The veil of the eyes. Yeah. Yes?
I just want to hear about that.
The veil of the eyes.
Yeah.
Well, I think about two instances of the veil of the eyes. Okay? One of them is that what you see is not really the only reality. That your eyes are a veil itself over reality by its focus on the outward. When one develops one's inward capacities and one's closeness to Allah, okay, one sees with the eyes of Allah. I'm sure many of you have heard of a hadith where it says, Allah says, my servant does not cease or continues to try to come close to me, okay, by doing supererogatory acts of worship, extra acts of worship, until I love him. And when I love him, he sees with my eyes. I become the eyes by which he sees, the tongue by which he speaks, and the hand by which he acts. And when Allah becomes the eyes by which you see, you are able to go beyond the veil of the eyes. You see? You're able to see the reality of a thing. This is why there's a hadith that says you must be careful of the mu'min, of the eye of the mu'min, because when he looks at you, he might be seeing your reality. So you have, like, for example, great ayatollahs, like, for example, Ayatollah Behjat. You ever heard of Ayatollah Behjat? You know, and great, I remember, you know, going and praying behind Ayatollah Behjat, and I know some friends who will not go to pray with Ayatollah Behjat because he looks at them and goes, they get all worried. You know, what's he seeing? Yeah? So that's the one idea of the veil of the eyes. And the other thing is about veiling the eyes. You know, that if the thing that you are looking at is in any way something that your nafs could fall prey to, your nafs could become subject to, okay, you veil your eyes from that. Okay? You know, so if, for example, you look at women, and you look at women with the eye of lust, for example, you veil your eyes from that. Yeah.
I believe the idea of, what has been mentioned in Quran about everything being created in pairs, how can you explain this, the polygamy with that one?
Well, in each case, the man is related to the opposite. You can read, you see, everything created in pairs, we're talking, yes?
The sisters couldn't hear the question.
He says, if everything created in pairs is a reality, what about polygamy? Well, first of all, we're talking about male and female. Okay, the reality of male and female. It doesn't talk about, for example, how many wives a male should have. You see, that's a different story, you know. But if one looks at that situation, okay, it's still a polarity. It's still a masculine with a feminine, although there might be more of the feminine. You see, it doesn't contradict the principle itself. Yes, brother.
I'm sorry, can you give us your opinion about dowry, the concept of dowry in Islam?
Of dawah?
Dowry.
Dowry.
Dowry. Comes to Muslims in the Western country.
Yes. A dowry, and this is a very good point, right? A dowry is a symbolic gesture that says to the woman that she is the one who brings a value to the marriage. And this proves the point of women's power. For example, heaven lies at the feet of mothers, not of fathers. Right? You're enjoying this, eh? Yeah. It lies at the feet of mothers, not of fathers. And we give a woman a dowry. She doesn't give us a dowry. And a woman marries us. We don't marry them. You know that? In the formula, the woman says, I am marrying you. And you say, I agree. Okay? What does it indicate? Okay? It indicates women's superiority in this field of marriage and relationships. What Allah does when He gives men authority in the marriage, He's doing this to compensate these two things, this particular thing. Because a woman brings barakah. The woman brings barakah in a marriage. You know, one of the rituals after you bring the wife in the house is to wash her feet and sprinkle the water in the four corners of the house. You don't wash your feet and sprinkle the water. Maybe the shayateen will come. You see? Because the woman is the locus, the manifestation of Allah's rahmah on the earth. So the dowry means this. The dowry is the symbol of the man saying, oh dear wife, you are a blessing for me. You are the one who would bring barakah to my house. You are the one who would bring barakah to my children. You see, and we give them this dowry. Unfortunately, in some societies, they treat it as a bride price. You know, they treat it as a bride price. They say, you know, for example, if you give a small dowry, oh, don't you know the worth of my daughter? You see? And they don't understand the meaning of dowry. And so now you have a situation in many of the Muslim world where men can't afford to pay a dowry. And you have people who can't get married, when at the same time the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, says, you know, it is a very good thing to give a small dowry. Because a dowry is a symbolic thing. Okay? A symbolic thing. You know, people treat it as some kind of like insurance against marriage, for example. You know, what's a dowry? You know, $4 million. But you don't have to pay it now. You don't have to pay it at all. Only if you want to divorce me. You know, that type of thing. You know, I think it's a kind of a degeneration of the dowry, really. You know, so yes, that's what a dowry is. It is acknowledging that a woman is sacred and it's a source of blessings in the home. And if men knew this, they would treat their women very kindly. They would help them in the house. Didn't Imam Ali alayhi salam help Hazrat Fatima in the housework and so on? You know, and they would show them love, and they would show them respect, and they would show them some kind of fear. Not fear because they'll beat them up or something like that. Fear of losing the love of a woman. Because the love of a woman, okay, is something that saves a man.
So what you say is that we have to look beyond the sum?
Yes.
You have to look at the physical reasons.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Now, that does not mean to say, okay, that dowries must all of them be at the same level. Okay? So, for example, the dowry of people of a higher economic status, for example, might be higher. Okay? But it should still be symbolic. You know, it shouldn't be part of some kind of like economic transaction that's taking place and that type of thing. Understand? Yeah.
Listen, salawat ala Muhammad wa alihi. Regarding spirituality within the marriage between husband and wife, how is it according to you that one could, living in this community with job, education, family, reach at higher levels of spirituality together?
I think simply for us, first of all, to accept the reality of spirituality as the most important thing to pursue in our lives. The most important thing. Okay? With spirituality, everything follows. Success in the dunya follows, and also contentment with the decree of Allah. It follows. With spirituality comes patience with suffering. So with spirituality comes everything. Once we recognize that particular fact, then we should start to explore areas where we can be spiritual. And there's some of them are very neatly mapped out for us. Our daily prayers. When you and your wife are committed to praying daily, on time, and so on, okay, you support each other. When you are committed to having the best fast of the month of Ramadan, you support each other. And that mutual support results in a growth of spirituality.
Listen, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. How does one know that they have met or married the right person?
If you don't have problems with each other, you have met the right person. If you have a lot of problems, then you should be rational enough to be able to sit down and talk about it. You know, I hope that brothers here especially would not be the husbands from hell. I've met a couple of husbands from hell. You know, they came to us in the Islamic Center and they looked like nice little lambs, like, right? You know, and then after a couple of years, you hear them beating their wives and, you know, behaving in a very bad way, you know. And unfortunately, most of the brothers tend to be guilty of that type of thing. I think for sisters, if they meet a guy like that, you know, they should seek some help. Seek some help for that person and seek some intermediary relationship, somebody who could act as an intermediary to help put that person on the right track. And that guy starts getting on with ego behavior, you know, coming home afterwards and saying, I don't care what the sheikh says, I'll do what I want and so on. You met the husband from hell. And maybe you should send him back there by divorcing him. I'm telling you. Okay? I mean, Muslim relationships in this part of the world is deplorable. Not just in this part of the world, everywhere. Now, we are in big trouble, Muslims. You know, so you have to be very, very careful. You know, brothers should realize their spiritual reality and their spiritual responsibility. You know, to give their wives the loving, the companionship, you know, the support, you know, having the patience with them that they should have. And strive to have a beautiful marriage. Because in having a beautiful marriage, you create a beautiful community. You know, unfortunately, a lot of brothers see marriage as a kind of an ego trip. You know, how many of you guys here know how to cook? Right? How many of you guys can wash the dishes after you eat? You know, how many of you guys would be willing to, for example, help your wife fold the clothes up after it's washed? How many of you guys sit down and plan, you know, for example, I haven't taken my wife out for a couple of weeks. Let me take her out and give her a good time and tell her how much I love her and stuff like that. You know? How many of you guys are willing to put up with your wives and have nonsense?
Every day.
Yes, because some women go on with nonsense too. You know, right? Marriage is a jihad, you know. Marriage is a jihad against the self. Right? You know, there's a book called Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. It's true. Right? When you're married to an alien. You know? They don't think like you. They do not think like you. And you don't think like them. So you have to strive to get into their head. And they have to strive to get into your head. Yes. It's marriage. There are very, very, very few marriages that are just one long, beautiful flight with nothing wrong, you know, just soaring in the eyes. It's only in a book you could probably read something like that. There would be some conflict. There would be some disagreement. You know, but if you're going to refer it back to the Quran and the Sunnah, if you talk to people who are responsible and who can shed light on the situation, if you're prepared to change, to adjust, you know, to be able to make that relationship possible, if you're prepared to see your own faults, for example, and try to fight against it, if you're prepared to accept the fault of another person and help them overcome it, inshallah, you'll have a good marriage. Well, unfortunately, I mean, the rate of divorce among married people in the Muslim community is a very, very high one. You know, it's because I don't think we see marriage as a jihad. You know, marriage as a task in life where you try to achieve harmony. And if we see it like that, inshallah, we'll be very harmonious.
I think that's all for today, Sheikh. Thank you very much for being here. Men vi har ikke tid nok, fordi der er et arrangement her bagefter, så vi bliver nødt til at tage meget. Thank you very much for being here with us. For at sige tak til Sheikh, så reciterer en salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Der er mad nu, og der er også et arrangement i morgen klokken 15:00 til 18:00. Sørg for at melde til, inshallah. Læs en salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.